People that only learn languages because they have to take 2 years in high school and they have to do it just with a book and just repeating yo estoy, tú estás, él está. Bro, I can understand why you would not want to learn a language if that's all that you're doing. I see why Americans are like, everyone else speaks English, why do I have to learn it, right?
Right.
I'm gonna give you 3 reasons. First one is that it actually is useful, and I'll get into it why. Number 2, people think that it's not fun and that it's tedious. I'm gonna explain how it can be fun. And number 3, people also say, what do they say? That it's difficult, and I'm gonna explain why it's not that hard.
Where should we start?
You can learn how to speak a language because it's easy. And I'm gonna show you this acronym that I made. The E stands for...
Has somebody ever spoken to you in a language that you do not understand? I certainly have, and it's made me feel anxious or frustrated because the words, the phrases, the dialect does not connect with one another. I needed to know how to learn languages as fast as possible. And I happen to have a friend, Jason Schafer, who knows 6 languages very well, and he's currently working on a 7th. I am super excited to have him on. And I know he's excited to share his tips and tricks on how he's learned these languages over the years. He very much loves people and other cultures, and he has a lot to share. I'm super excited for this episode, so let's dive in. Yeah, so Jason, your specialty,
Yes.
you would say is probably languages, right?
I would say it is languages. I've been doing them since I was young, and I'm a teacher currently. I do teach some foreign languages at my school, and my background also is in foreign languages, so absolutely.
Okay, what do you like about learning languages and even teaching languages?
The best part, I'd say, is actually getting to meet people from other countries, because here in the United States, we get to see some different cultures. We have culture from the Pacific Northwest, from the South, from the East. But then if you go to other countries, the way that people live and interact, the food that they have, how they do sports, how they dance, all that kind of stuff is very different. And the more languages that you know, the more places you're able to visit and then meet people from those places.
And how many languages do you currently speak?
I speak 6: English, Spanish, German, French, Portuguese, and Italian. But my Portuguese and my Italian, both I could improve a little bit.
Okay, so you're pretty fluent in majority of these languages.
Yeah, I have a C1 degree in both French and Spanish, and then my German is intermediate, probably B2. Portuguese, I'd say, is B2, and Italian, probably B1. Those are all levels on the Common European Framework and Reference for Languages. So, yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Like, you're going to show me some tips and tricks for learning new languages for an American like myself, uneducated in the world.
Sure.
What languages do you think are the easiest to learn first? Starting, if your native tongue is English.
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, the U.S. military has ranked the most spoken languages in the world into 5 different sectors. If you look this up on Google Images, you look up like U.S. military ranking for foreign languages, and it shows 5 different categories and how difficult, in other words, how many hours would it take the average American speaker or English speaker to be able to learn that language. And in category 1, you have languages like Dutch, Spanish, French, Danish, Norwegian, Swedish. So a lot of Indo-European languages that also have Romantic or Germanic roots.
Okay.
So that's why I think Spanish is a good language to start with, also because it's spoken by so many people here in the U.S. French is also good. There's a lot of French speakers in Africa, makes it a useful language. Other languages, though, like Swedish, Norwegian, and Dutch, everyone in those countries, in Holland, Sweden, and Norway, they probably speak English pretty well if they're under the age of 50. So it's not the most useful.
Okay.
But there's definitely some languages that are quite useful. Chinese and Arabic are very useful languages as well, but they're a lot harder to learn. And I think both of those are in category 5, which takes around 2,200 hours, I think.
That's crazy.
If I'm not mistaken.
22 hours of just straight.
2,200.
2,200 hours of just sitting down straight, looking at all the words, all the characters.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to learn languages. It doesn't have to be just that way. You can watch shows, you can listen to music, podcasts. We're going to get more into that later. But yeah, you got to spend a good amount of time to get those languages down.
And I'd like to know, like, what exactly is the structure of a language? What makes up a language?
Great question. So any way that 2 humans are able to communicate with each other, usually through spoken interactions, written interactions, even sometimes motion interactions like sign language, that would be considered a language. Even animals have language, and they just communicate like with clicks and whistles and that kind of stuff. So languages differ from species to species. However, a typical language will have nouns, which are people, places, and things, verbs, which is action words, adjectives, which describe nouns, adverbs, which describe verbs. And then after that, it gets a little bit more interesting because some languages have gender and plurality. As you know, Spanish and Portuguese and Italian have those. Other languages have cases, German is a language that has 4 cases. Greek and Russian have like 6 and 7 cases, I believe. And that just makes it more complicated. So different languages have different structures. If you look at Chinese or Thai, that's a tonal language. So if you say kapkun ka versus kapkun ka or kapkun ka, that depends if your tone is rising, staying the same, or going down.
Wow.
So in Chinese, you might say like the same word 4 different ways with different tone and accent, and it has 4 different meanings.
That's
So
crazy.
not something that we have to worry about in English that much.
Yeah, I mean, well, we have other things like same word meaning the
Homonyms.
homonyms.
Yeah.
We have tons
And
of those.
just the way that we pronounce our vowels too. The fact, have you seen that mug that says like, English is hard, but it can be understood through tough, thorough, something else. It has like the words tough, thorough, thought, and those are words that are spelled similarly, but they all have different pronunciation.
Yeah.
Sometimes the GH is like back of the throat, sometimes like an F sound. And I teach like people from Brazil and Spain and France how to speak English. They're like, why? Why is it this way? I'm sorry, English is weird. That's just how you have to learn it.
Yeah, there's no
So-
set rule for it. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
It's true.
So, getting into actually learning languages, where should we start?
I think it'd be good for me to explain how I ended up learning the languages that I know. That way people can see maybe the advantages that I had and also what they could have done similarly to me. And then I have some tips and tricks for people to learn languages as well. So let's start off with the fact that my father is from the United States. He spoke to me in English growing up. My mom's from Spain, so she talked to me in Spanish. Spanish, so we say gracias, azul, zapatos, different from Hispanic Spanish.
You kind of have a lisp, right? With
A
the
lisp,
stick.
a lisp, you said. Okay, that's how you say it in Spain. But sure, we can consider a lisp for today's podcast. I'm all right with that. It's called fefeo. That's how you pronounce it.
Theo, okay.
Correct. Growing up, my dad started talking to me in German at age 3 because he's a German teacher. So I picked that up as well. But then get this, Charlie. When my parents didn't want me to understand something, you know what they would do? They would talk in French because I didn't speak any French at all. So I remember being in the backseat of the car and both my parents were yapping away in French. And I was really upset. And I was like, I can't understand anything they're saying. And someday I'm going to learn French. And that way they won't be able to keep on doing this, right? So I vowed in my head at that day that I was going to learn French. And sure thing, in high school, I asked my uncle, who was a foreign language teacher at my school, if he could take on French as a class. And he's like, sure, I don't speak that much French, but for you, I'll do it. So I managed to take 2 years of French in high school, a year of German, went to France to learn more French there in college, and that's where my French really took off. And by the end of the year, I had a C1 degree, which is like almost fluent. So
Would you say you have a kind of a knack for learning languages?
yes, but mostly because like my mom talked to me in Spanish growing up and my dad talked to me in English and German. So there I had the Romantic language base and the Germanic language base, which then helps me with so many languages spoken in Europe.
Okay.
So
What type of learner
was
do you think
nice.
you are?
how do you mean?
Like, are you like a visual learner? Are you a auditory learner? Or
All of the above,
Okay.
yeah. And we're going to get into like how you can learn languages visually through all the senses and like different ways that are more strong for some people and maybe work less for others.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Because I know for myself, I'm kind of more of a I need to do it kind of
Mm,
learner.
Right.
I need a hands-on approach a lot of
Yeah.
times, and it's hard for me to pick up certain things.
Sure. I
If
get what
I'm
you're
just
saying.
listening to it, I'm like, oh, I don't remember what you just said, kind of thing.
Right.
So if I
Mhm.
don't catch everything that you say in this podcast, I'll be coming back to you.
No worries. I got you in that case.
So moving on from here,
Do you mind actually if I talk about how I learned Portuguese and Italian really quick?
Yes, let's do
Because
that.
those are the
Yeah.
ones that I've taught myself,
Okay.
and that I didn't have that much. Like, for example, I never took any Portuguese or Italian classes, yet I was able to teach myself. So for people that are watching that maybe didn't have family members that spoke to them in those languages, and they also never took those in college or high school, and it's kind of too late for them to go back to school,
Right.
how could they learn a language?
Yeah.
Them hearing my story, I think, would be useful for them as well.
Absolutely.
So back to France, when I was learning French in the cafeteria, I remember that there was people there. There was the Americans,
Mm-hmm.
there was the French, and there was the Brazilians that were there to learn theology. So I walked in, and after the first few days, I pretty much saw what the spaces were, and I thought, I already speak English, so I'm not going to sit with the Americans. I already speak French, and I'm learning French here. That's my purpose for
Mhm.
being here.
Mhm.
I'm going to go sit with the Brazilians, so that way I can learn Portuguese. And I did that. I started hearing what they were saying. I thought it was pretty similar to Spanish, and I started picking up tudo bem, como vai, different expressions. From there, I watched a bunch of shows and movies on Netflix in Portuguese, picked up a lot of Portuguese there. And then after that, I went on a trip to Brazil, to Sao Paulo, learned a lot of slang that they have there that you're not going to learn on the internet that much. And that way was able to like learn a lot of Portuguese.
Mhm.
Similar thing with Spanish. When I was studying in France, I went on the trip to Italy, spent some time in a lot of different cities, and just reading the street signs, I was like, I can pick this up. I speak Spanish and this is not too different. And that's how I was able to learn more Italian. I bought myself textbooks. I watched a lot of shows and movies as well, found some podcasts. And from there on out, it was me just reviewing it, finding people to practice with, listening to Italian before I went to bed, all that kind of stuff. And now I have a decent level.
What was your motivation for just pushing through? Like, because I feel like it's a lot of work to just do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the cultures that I'm interested and attracted to.
Okay.
I love soccer, and soccer is a big part of like both South American culture and European culture. So that there was one thing, like getting to know more about these teams and these players and the transfer market. If I learn different languages, I can learn more about that, right? The fact that my parents have a lot of friends and relatives all over Europe as well, I think that played a role. And then just, I don't know, you take a look at French culture, German culture, Brazilian culture, it's all very interesting to me, you know? And the cost of learning a language to understand that culture more is not as high as, for example, if I was huge into anime or Chinese culture or South Korean culture, I'd have to learn Japanese, Chinese, Korean, which is going to be a lot tougher. So I looked out that the things that I'm into also have easier languages to learn.
Okay.
I like Arabic culture, for example, like Northern Africa, the Middle East. I'd love to learn more about their lifestyle and how they live. But there's just a much higher price to pay because Arabic is one of those languages that you have to spend so many more hours to learn.
And why is that? Yeah.
So first of all, the whole writing system is different. They don't use the Cyrillic alphabet or the Latin alphabet. They write from left to right instead of right to left. Sorry, they write from left to right instead of they write from right to left instead of left to right. That's how they do it in Arabic. Also, they have a lot of different ways to say, like, for example, good morning. If you're saying it to a girl or to a guy, it's going to be different. If you're saying it to a group of guys or a group of girls, it's going to be different, if I'm not mistaken. And then also how it's pronounced, too. Like, la moaxa, ya usted, like a lot of things that I think are guttural, and just the pronunciation is trickier. Speaking German and Portuguese, that would help, but it's harder. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So learning a language. If you wanted to teach me Spanish, let's say.
Yeah.
I took a year of Spanish already.
Yeah.
Back in high school, and it's been a while since I've done it. I remember nothing.
Right.
I didn't value it as much back then, but now I really would like to.
Yeah.
Where would we start?
That's a good question. So this is going to be useful for the people that are watching that have maybe taken some courses in the past. They don't have time to go back to school full time, and they also are too old that they can't be like listening to their mom and dad speak that language at home. So yeah, let me give you some tips and tricks that I've used to learn different languages that I think would be helpful for you for Spanish, and how that might be a good fit. I'm going to start off with just saying Jason's Language School.
Yes. Is this on social media somewhere, or?
No, maybe it will be soon.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just like my business that I started almost 10 years ago now, actually. 10 years ago as of this year. Wow.
That's
wild.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
2014 seems like yesterday.
It's just time has flown by. So I started off teaching Spanish, French, and German. Enjoyed it quite a bit, but then I became a full-time teacher and didn't have time for this anymore. But I still do some tutoring online. So yeah, if you can find someone that can teach you a language and they're also a native speaker, huge plus. That's magnificent.
What do you look for in a tutor usually? What should someone look for in a tutor?
First of all, someone that you get along with, someone whose teaching style matches your learning style. If you learn really well with songs and with charades and with chants, don't get someone that's just into like grammar and memorizing different verb lists and all that kind of stuff, because you're going to be bored out of your mind, right? But if you're someone that likes the technical aspect and you like the rote memorization and conjugating verbs, then maybe someone that teaches you French by playing the guitar is not going to be your best option. So find someone that matches with you with your learning style.
Okay.
So yeah.
And how can somebody find out what learning style they have? Do you know? I know you're a teacher, so
I would say this: like, go through the options that I'm going to tell you and find out which ones work best for you, and then see where you can go from there.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. Well, let's go. Let's
get
absolutely started with this.
I think a lot of people say I don't have time to learn a language. On your commute to work, you're probably commute to work. You're probably going to spend 10 to 15 minutes in the car or the bus or wherever you're at. You probably have time to like listen to a podcast or listen to some audio type stuff that have to do with languages. So I'm going to suggest two things right here. On Spotify, they've got plenty of podcasts from French to Spanish to German, Portuguese, Italian, also Arabic, Taiwanese, etc. So you can learn a lot of languages just by listening to podcasts. But one that I really enjoy is actually Coffee Break. It's done by Radiolingua Network, and they have podcasts for like the most spoken languages in the world. I think the top 6 or 7. And they do it in a way that's really good for U.S., American, or English speakers because they alternate between the target language, Spanish for you, and your home language, which is English.
You said this was Coffee Break.
Exactly, yeah. Coffee Break Spanish, Coffee Break Portuguese. It's from a guy in Scotland. He's hilarious. He has a great accent, and he makes it really entertaining. So if you were to do this, you'd be able to hear enough English in the podcast that you weren't completely lost, but you'd also hear enough Spanish that it's pushing you just outside of your comfort zone, so you're actually able to learn and actually, get a grip on your Spanish and keep on moving along.
That's awesome. So they're each different, like he has a podcast for each language then.
Right. You'd find Coffee Break Italian, Coffee Break German, Coffee Break French. During the pandemic, I was working at an organic farm, and I had like 7 hours every day that I was just picking tomatoes and cucumbers. What did I do? I put on Coffee Break Portuguese, Coffee Break Italian, and I learned a bunch of like words and languages while I was picking produce. So people say I don't have enough time. You can squeeze in 10, 15 minutes in your day.
And if you're more of an auditory learner, it sounds like that is probably especially the route you go.
Right, absolutely. Continuing on that auditory trend, actually, this has been my best teacher since, I would say, 2018 or so. Netflix, believe it or not.
Really?
This is better, though, if you're like higher up with a language. If you're at least intermediate, you can then put on the show. You can have the audio in the language of that show. And then subtitles, you can start with English, and then once you get good enough, you can switch it to Spanish or your target language. I did that with a bunch of shows in Portuguese and in Italian. Watched movies like Cidade de Deus, Tropa de Elite, classic Brazilian movies, and was able to learn a lot. Not Squid Games. That'd be for Korean, right? Is that from Korea? Yeah, exactly. So that could be ideal. But Netflix is a huge tool. I recommend it, but only once you have like a good 6-9 months under your belt. Or else it's going to be too complicated. You're not going to understand really what's going on. So this is a tool that you have to level up to. So yeah.
Wow.
A tool that you don't need any leveling up to, also on your phone, Quizlet. I use this quite a bit. Great. I used it when I was in college to like learn vocab lists and to learn, different Bible verses and that kind of stuff. But Quizlet is great if you have like a list of vocabulary words that you want to learn. Imagine that you want to learn how to say all the items that are in your kitchen, right? The utensils, the plates, the food, all that kind of stuff. You either look up a list on Quizlet or you can make your own, and then you just study it. It's like flashcards. But instead of it being physical, you would see like el pan. You're turning over the bread. Or you see it first in English, the kitchen, la cocina, and you're able to learn like that.
You can do other stuff with Quizlet too, right?
Sure thing. They have the flashcard option. They have learn. They have match. They have test. They also have spell mode and write mode. So you could hear the word. You could hear el tenedor. You have to type it out, hit enter, and if it's incorrect, then it will show you how to spell it correctly, and you'll try it again.
Oh, that's sweet.
So absolutely fantastic for learning vocabulary. When it comes to putting words and phrases together, I'd say Duolingo is a little bit better than Quizlet in that, because you have like a word bank and you have to choose from that word bank where they go. Quizlet doesn't have that option yet, but maybe in the future they will.
That's cool.
Yeah. On the topic of flashcards, if you actually make physical flashcards and you put them around the house, then when you see those items, you'll be reminded of those, and you're like, oh yeah, that's what that is.
Are these homemade?
These are ones that I got from the internet for French words.
Okay.
But if you, for example, made one of these and you put it on right here, and you just said el micrófono. Now, every time that you walk into the room and you see the sticky note on there, you see that it's el micrófono, and then you go along memorizing it. You put one on your car door, on the fridge, on the bathroom door, places where you're often, and you're going to see that, and then because of the memorization or because of the repetition aspect, you're going to like subconsciously be memorizing it without that much work.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the goal in doing this.
Awesome.
Otherwise, just cutting out little flashcards, and then when you're bored, like testing yourself. I do that with my students. They've been able to learn quite a few French words that way. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So we need to get some flashcards for the I Needed to Know podcast.
That we do, exactly.
Yes.
Put them on these things, la luz, la cámara, el libro, that kind of stuff. You remember that one probably from high school?
I do remember that one.
Yeah?
I can't say it very well.
That's all right. Well, let's talk about el libro.
Oh, let's go.
Here we have short stories in Brazilian Portuguese. I use this to learn Portuguese, and I have the exact same copy, but for Italian. They're short stories, and what's really cool is in the text, the words that are in bold are like vocab words that the authors think would be a little bit more challenging, and then they also include the definition at the end. So if I go to the end of this chapter, I can see that right here, all the vocab words are right there, and then I can see what the translation is because they have it in English. And what's neat is I can take my phone, I can get a picture of this, and Quizlet can automatically make a list of all of these and a study set.
Oh, that is sweet.
Yeah, they have something called Magic Notes, I think, and you just scan this, and then it makes the Quizlet set for you.
Does it tell you how to like say the word?
It doesn't. That's what Google
Okay.
Translate's good for.
Okay.
Just look it up and you'll have it right there.
How accurate is Google Translate when it comes to that?
It's gotten a lot better. Yeah,
Okay.
I use it actually sometimes in my classes. I tell my students how to use it, and I'd say the pronunciation is pretty decent.
Okay.
So, yeah, something that you can do. It also comes with neat comprehension questions at the end, so you can test if you're able to understand what was in the chapter, and I quite recommend it. It's pretty good.
Awesome.
If you're ready to level up to a bigger book, what I like to do is, you know how college textbooks are ridiculously expensive?
Yes.
So just buy like the not the latest version, but the second to latest version,
Okay.
right? The ones that the universities then have to like get rid of because they have the new and updated version. This is like maybe 3 years older than the newest one in the library. And this here, I bought for, I don't know, maybe $15, so quite a bit cheaper. And it comes with a lot of content on how to learn Italian. It's basically a textbook that you would use to be able to learn Italian, like in a college setting or high school setting. And if you already have a brain that understands how language works, a teacher is not that necessary. They're going to be there for like facilitating the conversation portions, for the testing, also
Right.
for understanding how to pronounce the words. But otherwise, you can just look at that list and you can teach yourself all those words. Quizlet, boom, that helps you with that. Google Translate, that helps you with the pronunciation. Other resources that you can use to help you to actually talk to Italian native speakers. Plenty of tools that you can use, but this is kind of the thing that gives you the most resources. So instead of having to look up, what should I learn in Italian on Quizlet? Boom, it has it right here, and it teaches you everything you need to know.
That's awesome.
Comes with culture, comes with little tidbits. It even has like videos that accompany it. So if you just find yourself a good curriculum and you know how the language works, then you can teach yourself.
Should you find the teacher's manual?
You can if you want.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a bad option. So I think a lot of people run into the issue, though, of not having people to practice with. And that's where the next few things are pretty helpful. There's this app called Tandem. I use it quite a bit to be able to talk to people in other languages. Because what do I have to offer? I do have 6 languages because I've learned those. But even yourself, like you have English to offer, right? You know how English works. You know expressions in English. You know how to pronounce words in English. And a lot of people are wanting that. So you today could hop on Tandem and you could be like, hey, I'm Charlie. I'm trying to learn Spanish. And I offer English as like, that's what I know. So then people would reach out to you. They'd say hola or hey. And then they tell you what they want to know in English. And you can be like, this is what I want to know in Spanish. You get to chatting. You can do like voice notes to understand pronunciation. You can do video calls if you feel comfortable enough. And it's a good way to be able to discuss languages with other people.
That's actually
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, it's
platform.
neat.
And this is an app you can just download?
The app's called Tandem.
Can you also use like your desktop if you wanted to?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, you're meeting strangers on the internet, so be careful with that.
Yeah.
You know, some people maybe don't have the best intentions.
You
but
don't recommend this for like young kids necessarily?
No. If you're older, this is probably better. But if you obviously have a good head on your shoulders and you know what you're doing, this can be a good way to talk to natives. And most of the people that I've interacted with there, they've just been on there to like learn languages, so it's been pretty good.
Awesome.
But yeah, a couple more things here. All right, so this is what I was referring to earlier about buying a book. Plenty of books you can buy, can highly recommend. The next thing, and this is the best thing that you can do, so for you it probably wouldn't work out, but for other viewers that are watching, this is what I definitely recommend. If you can get a job or an internship in another country, maybe go on a mission trip also, that can be a fantastic way to like kickstart your understanding in that language. I worked in France. I worked doing like yard work for this family. I spent 7 hours under the sun listening to like French radio. And it was great because I was just like, yard work is pretty mindless, right? You just have to do physical tasks. So your brain can be understanding different things that are challenging for your brain, and you will do just fine. Right. So doing something like that, getting in with a local family in a different country is great.
What resources do you have for getting into like other things?
Getting into a different country?
Like getting in with like, because I've heard of like work study programs kind of almost, or.
Oh yeah. Actually, I do have some ideas for that. So especially for Americans that speak English well, they have opportunities in France with TAPIF, in Spain with a different program. But basically, they're looking for people that can practice English with high school students and middle school students in different countries around Europe, mostly. So if you have a good enough level, I think you need to speak some French or some Spanish to be able to get into these programs. You can go abroad and you can work, I think, 15 hours a week in that environment. One of my friends did it in Madrid and she had a great time.
Oh, wow.
And you just like, that'd be 3 hours a day for 5 days a week. You just talk to the kids in English and you're the conversation partner, and the teacher uses you to be able to like show other people about American culture and like show people how to pronounce the words with an American accent and whatnot. So you get to do that. They help you out to find room and board. And then the rest of the time, you get to just hang out in whatever city you're at. You get to travel around Europe for a little bit. Some of these programs have a limit as to how many times you can do it. But most of the reviews that I've read and people that I've talked to who have done this, it's been overwhelmingly positive.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I can recommend that. Last thing, a little bit of advertising here for Adventist Colleges Abroad. Shout out ACA. I'm like, this is the reason that I exist nowadays, because my dad went to Spain to study Spanish. My mom was working at this institution, and that's where they met. So if it wasn't for ACA, I might not be here chatting with you today.
Oh, what a shame. You can't have that.
I don't know. But anyways, it's a great program. I did the ACA program in Spain as a volunteer, helping teach English, and then in France as an actual student.
Yeah.
I've also visited the campuses in Italy and in Austria, and I think also in Germany when I was younger. So basically, you get to go over to this country, wherever you decide to go. They also have in South America and Lebanon, in a couple other places. And you get to learn the target language. They have really neat classes, like sometimes even like 12 students to 1 teacher ratio. So you get a good amount of exposure there. And then besides this, they also take you on cultural trips. When I was in Spain, they took us down to Morocco. They took us to southern Spain, Madrid and Barcelona. When I was in France, we went to Paris, Nice, Marseille, a couple other places. So very neat spots you can go and see. And what's really cool is all the credits that you get at these institutions transfer back to your home base, to your university at home.
Oh, that is cool. And how much does something like that cost?
Cheaper than college here, actually.
Oh, really?
So the college that I went to here, I think I was paying, was it 28,000? I think, maybe a year. And then in these programs, I think most of them are around 20,000 or less.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But that was pre-COVID. Now it might be a little more expensive.
And this is more of like a religious institution, right?
Correct.
So is there something for people that may not be wanting a religious theme to their whole language experience?
The answer is be born in Europe and do something called Erasmus. No, I'm kidding.
How do you spell that?
Right, yeah. Erasmus is Erasmus. He was a Dutch philosopher and linguist, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. And basically he said like, hey, we should have these programs in which other young students get to travel to other countries. And like, if you're studying nursing, like instead of doing your whole program in Holland, you can go down to Barcelona and do a couple quarters there. Or if you're studying linguistics in Poland, you can go to the UK and you can work on your English and then go back to Poland to finish up. So I wish the US had something similar, but we don't.
No.
But there's some study abroad programs that you can do. My dad has a foreign exchange program actually at the high school he works at, and he takes students that are in his German and Spanish classes to Germany and to Spain. They live there for a month, and then the next summer, students from those countries come and stay here with exchange families.
That's
here.
pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. So
that's awesome.
There's definitely options if you want to be able to go abroad and like study with other people in other countries and not do the religious route. There's definitely ways of doing it. A quick internet search will like get you most of what you need. So
the nice thing about the religious route is for you have similar values with many of these people that you're going out over there
right
with. And it does give you a sense of like almost safety or security, because you're with people that are of a faith that looks down upon doing things that may not be the best, like stealing, murder. I mean, most people look down on that anyways, but it gives you that extra incentive not to be able to be around people that might be bad influences on you.
Yeah, I agree. I know a lot of people have like mixed views on religion, and I know that religion has gone like a bad name. There's been a lot of bad things that have happened in the name of religion.
Right.
But at the same time, I agree. If you have like people of a like-minded faith that you want to be with, one of these programs might be up your alley.
Yeah,
it's true.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
So you've been to several countries then, it sounds like.
That's true.
How many countries has been?
I want to say 23 now.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I've been lucky.
Can you name all of them right here?
Sure. Here we go.
All right, let's go.
Well, Canada, USA, Mexico, Jamaica, Panama, and Costa Rica for North America and Central America.
Mm-hmm.
For South America, I've only been to Brazil, and I want to go to a lot more countries, especially because I speak Spanish and Portuguese. So in Africa, I've been to Morocco, and then Europe is where I've been to a lot of countries: Portugal, Spain, France, Andorra, Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Czech Republic, Switzerland, Austria, Liechtenstein, Italy, San Marino, Monaco, Vatican City is a country, and the UK. And that's that. I don't know if that adds up to 23, but hopefully it does.
And which country has been your favorite?
I loved Morocco.
Really?
Yeah, it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. The tea was incredible, really good.
Really?
I bought a lot of soccer jerseys for not a lot of money.
That's funny.
And yeah, I wish that I had spoken more Arabic at the time. I don't really speak Arabic, but I got by with French. So I really liked it there. Brazil was amazing too. The people in Brazil are just really friendly and receptive, at least in my experience. I got to do a lot of street soccer and basketball with people there. And the food, churrasco, is great.
Really?
So yeah, it's like their Brazilian barbecue.
That's awesome.
Besides that, Jamaica, the vibes were really great there. Costa Rica had incredible wildlife and scenery. France, the history there, I think, is great. Same thing with Germany and Spain also. Like, a lot of those European countries have tons of culture. And Italy for the vibes, because they're so funny there, the way they speak.
That's
Ma cosa fai? It's great. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So if somebody's wanting to travel, do you have any tips and tricks for them?
I do. If you can meet local people that you can interact with, that's great, but also be safe with that too. For example, we know that couch surfing, a lot of people have had good experiences and a lot of people have not had good experiences. Right. So be careful with that. But if you can go away from like the tourist traps and you can, for example, if I had the opportunity to visit these museums, go to these churches and see these like famous artifacts, I might take that. But if I could instead go to like a local winery and help people press grapes, or I could go to like a dog shelter and take these dogs on walks, or I could go and volunteer as a ref at a soccer game at, I don't know, some league, some country in the world, that's going to be a lot cooler of an experience. Or like go and attend a dance class, learn how to do salsa, go and help a farmer do something else on his field. Like, that's going to be cool because you are interacting with the locals. You get to see how they live life. Maybe they'll invite you for a meal. Maybe you'll get to attend, I don't know, a religious service if they have one, and you get to see how life is actually like. Versus a lot of these places, it's just the tourist thing. Like, you're surrounded by tourists also. You just see the building or like the little stone or the important church, and then you got your pictures, but I like the communication, right? Like, what makes people different in this country? How do they celebrate? What are their values? How do they see the world? What are their thoughts on Americans? Like, that kind of stuff.
What are their thoughts on Americans?
Oh, that's definitely mixed. But that's one thing that I recommend. If you can find cheap lodging too. Mm-hmm. I tend to go kind of cheap with my lodging. You can definitely find cheap transportation in Europe because that is a great place. Their public transportation system is amazing. Trains, buses, everything you need in the big cities at least. Definitely recommended.
I know there can be some areas that are kind of dangerous, right, for tourists. How do you avoid those scenarios? Where
looking up where the dangerous parts are. So wherever there's tourists, there's going to be money, and wherever there's money, there's going to be people that are wanting to get that money illegally. So you're just gonna have to be careful. A lot of the places, like in Barcelona, Las Ramblas is like one of the main streets that has like a lot of neat boutiques and street performers. Keep a watch on your belongings at all times. Like, know where your phone is, know where your wallet is. Don't be wearing that much fancy jewelry. Look up before you go someplace where are the dangerous neighborhoods. Before I went to Sao Paulo, I was checking out, okay, is this a spot to be in by myself? Is this not a spot to be in by myself? Dress like the people of the country that you're visiting. Please don't stand out like an American, like a sore thumb.
That's probably tip number one right there.
Yeah. Don't be going out with sandals and shorts and what are those fancy sandals called? And Birkenstocks. Birkenstocks and white socks are going to be
Do people in
seen
other
pretty
countries
quick.
typically dress better than Americans?
And my experience in Europe was that, especially at the university that I went to get my master's degree, I'm still getting it. People there, like both the students and the teachers, they dress up like pretty professionally. No one's showing up in sweatpants. Like in American college campuses, dude, if it's a 100-person lecture, like they're not going to care what you show up in, right? But there, people definitely treat it with a bit more classiness.
That's all. Okay, so yeah,
that makes a difference.
Yeah, makes a difference.
Oh man, don't be super loud speaking English on like public transportation. That was something that I definitely dealt with, and it's just, you're letting everyone know that you're American, and Americans typically have cash, so you might be attracting more people to you that might want your belongings. So be careful with that.
So watch that.
If you can just, I don't know, keep it down, I guess the word I'm looking for is low profile.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be super flashy. I know a lot of Americans are proud to be American, but if you're out there like wearing shirts that say these colors don't bleed, or like back-to-back World War champions with the like cawing bald eagle, they're going to know. They going to know out there. So, just be careful with that.
So keep a low profile. Probably number one thing for
Sure, I'd say so. But here's the thing. A lot of these people in these other countries, like, you have to understand, they might be thieves and they might be thugs and criminals because of necessity. Like, they don't have cash, and you need cash to survive. Well, you got to be careful. And, like, obviously it's not excusing that type of behavior, but you got to understand like where these people are coming from. But then since you know where they're coming from too, like, don't put yourself in the wolf's mouth.
Right.
If you know that it's a dangerous place, like, don't go there. If you know you're not supposed to go out past 9 p.m. at night, stay inside the hostel or hotel. Like, be reasonable. You know, you like, how should I explain it? You're not invincible out there.
Right. Act like a CIA agent almost.
You could, yeah. You could act like a CIA agent. Yeah. I don't know. Have fun with it too.
Yeah. How is your experience? Because I know you don't always keep a low profile, right? Or you...
I like to do a lot of solo traveling. I took this bad boy with me when I went to a Catholic conference in Lisbon. Lisbon is a safe city. There was people from all over the world, over 500,000 pilgrims.
What is this for people just listening?
DJI Osmo Pocket.
Okay,
It's a neat little camera, and I hooked it up to my microphone. And I literally, like, I could walk down the street and no one cared about me, which I was fine with.
That is pretty cool.
Isn't that sweet?
Actually.
But
Yeah.
then when I put it up here and like start like vlogging, like everyone wanted to be in the video. And like I would just be walking by and they would come by, they'd say, España, Brazil, Deutschland. And like they're all saying like their country names, they have the country flags behind them.
Funny.
So I was like, hey, cool. You want to talk more about where you're from? And like, what do you think about the whole event? And people there were like in really happy spirits. The city of Lisbon did a really good job to accommodate these people, in my opinion. So everyone was in a good mood. And that's a lot more of a low stress profile. If you're walking around with that, where everyone's there as tourists as it is, you can get a lot more better interactions. If I'm walking down the streets of Sao Paulo, or I'm out in Morocco and I'm like in a seedy area, I might not be flashing that around, especially if there's no other tourists around. You just got to know when to pull it out and whatnot. So
That makes sense.
yeah.
So is there anything else you want to cover that you think is super important?
I do actually. I want to talk about languages a little bit more
because
I want to discuss why Americans have a hesitancy to learn languages and 3 reasons why they should learn languages.
Okay, let's go over that.
So this is pretty important.
Yeah.
As you know, like a lot of Americans maybe don't see the value in learning other languages. And I get where they're coming from. English is the most spoken language in the world. I just checked yesterday, because if you take into account native English speakers and also English as a second language, that's the big number right there. People that learn English as a second language. Together, those combined are more than all of the Mandarin speakers in the world, which China is in number 2 with Mandarin.
Well,
Yeah.
it's because it's the language of business across the world, right? The world economy
It is. Exactly.
uses English.
So that's why English is so huge, and that's why you have English speakers like all over the world, besides countries like Australia, UK, and Canada.
Yeah.
You know? So that's one thing. I see why Americans are like, everyone else speaks English, why do I have to learn it, right?
Right.
I'm going to give you 3 reasons. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to say, I'm going to debunk some misconceptions about languages. Is what I'm going to say. The first one is that it actually is useful, and I'll get into it why. Number 2, people think that it's not fun and that it's tedious. I'm going to explain how it can be fun. And number 3, people also say, what do they say? That it's difficult, and I'm going to explain why it's not that hard.
Are you sure? Because I have a difficult time.
Well, I'm going to show you then why it's not that difficult. So number 1, the usefulness. Even if you don't plan on doing that much traveling, and when you go to Paris, you can survive a week with people looking at you bad because you're an American and you don't speak French, even if you can withstand that, there's other reasons too. Number 1, if you are trying to get a job that's highly coveted and you have another language under your belt, chances are they're going to go with you.
Sure,
if you speak Spanish also, if you speak a different language, I have the job that I have because I speak Spanish, because 85% of my students are Hispanic, and I've got students that don't speak any English. So me speaking Spanish is huge and helps me out with that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. And this is in America.
This is in the United States. Yeah, exactly. In a community that has a lot of Caucasian people, and that still helped me out. So yeah. Also, if you are at risk for Alzheimer's, learning a language can actually postpone the onset of Alzheimer's by quite a bit. Scientists and people that know about science, you can correct me on this, but I think that it actually helps like do something with the gray matter in your brain, and might even do something with increasing the folds that you have. I'm not sure, but like the neuronic pathways that you put down when you interact with another language, I know is a good way to like prevent Alzheimer's. All the details might not be correct, but you get the gist.
You're right.
So yeah, definitely if you want to learn about other cultures as well, like we have our holidays and we have our traditions here, but if you want to learn about Carnival in Rio, or King's Day in Spain, or I don't know, Oktoberfest in Germany, like a lot of different things that you can learn about when you know other languages and you know about those cultures. Right. So definitely some reasons there. Number 2, learning languages is tedious and it can be difficult. Is that what I said? Or boring? That's what I said. Yeah. Boring. People that only learn languages because they have to take 2 years in high school and they have to do it just with a book and just repeating, yo estoy, tú estás, él está. Bro, I can understand why you would not want to learn a language if that's all that you're doing. But hopefully, if you paid attention during this podcast and you saw all the different tools that I discussed on how you can learn a language, like this is fun ways. You got Netflix shows, podcasts, you have meetups with people from around the world, you have the Tandem app, You have different apps like Quizlet that you can use. All that kind of stuff is going to make it more exciting. Duolingo, with its reward-based system, like you have fun ways to build learn a language that's not just rote memorization and repeating after a teacher. But you have to see the value in it first. It's not going to be that fun if you don't see the value, right?
Right.
Lastly, people think that learning languages is difficult. You are one of those people that thinks Spanish is challenging. So let me tell you why it's maybe not as hard as you might think. You can learn how to speak a language because it's easy. And I'm going to show you this acronym that I made. The E stands for exposure, okay? First of all, you have to be exposed to the language. If you are not listening to the language and if you don't have people around you that speak it, you're not going to learn it that fast. You move to a different country, or you have podcasts going on in the background, or you listen to songs in a different language before you go to bed, that's going to give you that exposure. So you know how it's pronounced, what the intonation is. You start catching basic words. That's the first thing here. Best way to do that, travel to a different country. If you can't, you can get a foreign exchange student from somewhere else. You can listen to podcasts, like I said. That's the first thing right there. So even you could start today. You could start with coffee break Spanish. Or you could start watching a show on Netflix if your Spanish level is high enough. That's the first thing right there. If you can, and this helps out a ton, A here stands for abroad. I know that not everyone can go abroad, but if you are able to, you can do that for 9 months in like a school program. You could do it for 2 weeks if you have like a mission trip opportunity here and there. Or even if you were to go down to Mexico for a weekend, boom, you're going abroad. You are surrounded by Spanish. You have it right there. So that's my another option, and that's A for abroad. We're now got half of it done. The S in easy stands for specific. You have to know what your specific goals are. You can't just hop into a language and be like, oh, I'm going to, by osmosis, the language is going to gradually be downloaded into my brain. That's not how it works. You got to know, are you trying to figure out cultural expressions? Are you trying to learn the most 100 spoken words in a language? Are you trying to conjugate tricky, irregular verbs in Spanish or French? You got to know what your goals are and like, where do you want to be in 6 months' time with the language? And then reverse planning.
I've heard some people say to learn a language, to learn the most spoken 500 words, I think it is, typically, just to give you to start with, and then from there you can kind of move into more of how to use it in different sentences and stuff.
I think that's great. I actually did that to start off with Portuguese and Italian, and I knew that they were going to be pretty similar to Spanish, so I thought I can learn these words because a lot of these are cognates. That's like a word that's similar in one language to another, like interesting in French, intéressant in French, interesante in Spanish. So you can see a lot of these are cognates, and even if they're not, you can learn like the most basic words on Quizlet or even on these types of books. They're likely going to have some of the most spoken words, and you can just start off with that. So yeah, I would highly recommend. This one, you can't change this anymore, but you can change it for your future generation. If you can start when you're young, that helps out a ton. There we go. Easy. Languages are easy. If you can start learning a language like straight out of the womb, that's going to help you the most. I've also heard that like 5 years old is when the brain is most active and like processing languages. So that's another good time as well.
So that's when you need to start teaching your kids.
Like right from the get-go, dude. That's what my mom did with me. Like she was like, don't think but Spanish for you. So yeah, that's what we did. And I plan on doing the same thing with my kids. If I manage to learn one more language and have a 7th language, either Arabic or Catalonian, I could talk to my kids in a different language every single day of the week. Not that I'm going to do that, but that's something that, you know, you could do. My parents were worried that I was going to get my languages mixed up when I was growing up, but by age 3, I was already doing like English and Spanish, and then German I was getting a hold of as well. So it's something that can be done. But yeah. Anyways, you guys heard it here. Languages are not hard. They're easy because if you have exposure, you go abroad, you are specific with your intentions and your goals, and you start when you're young, you'll be more set. So yeah, there you have it.
Perfect. So to wrap this up, what do you have to say? What do you think the viewers need to take away from this?
I would say if you are serious about starting a language, open up a Quizlet account. I know most of y'all have Duolingo downloaded on your phone, but every time a little owl notification pops up, you're like, we're going to forget that. But yeah, dabble a little bit with Duolingo. Find a show that you might enjoy in a different language. And yeah, maybe you're in an environment where learning a language really isn't that advantageous to you. In that case, it's okay. Don't do something that you're not going to enjoy, because languages you do have to put time and effort into. So if this is not your type of lifestyle, then that's all good. But if you've watched this far in the episode, it's probably because you are interested in doing something with languages.
And you are going to be creating a platform for teaching people languages, right?
I want to. Yeah, I want to do one in which I help native Brazilians learn English. That would be ideal because that's one of the languages that I'm most into. And I also think that there's a lot more resources for Spanish speakers and French speakers and German speakers to learn English compared to Portuguese speakers.
Okay.
So I hope to delve into that field.
Yeah.
And that's where we can access it.
So far it's not created at the time of this recording. You're still figuring out the name, the branding behind it, and everything. But once you have Jason's Language School up and running it's not going to be called Jason's Language School.
It'll be called something else, but it's all good. Yeah.
It's going to be good.
Hopefully.
Something to look forward to. And I'll probably be watching you a lot so I can learn. Actually, I'll just talk to you in person. What am I saying?
There we go. We'll do that. Exactly. But only in Spanish.
Only in Spanish?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Solo en español. No vamos a hablar nada en inglés.
Sí.
Así que buena suerte. Just kidding. Buena suerte means good luck.
Oh.
But sounds like you got plenty of that.
Oh,
so.
well, gracias.
Sí, de nada. Un placer
estar
aquí contigo hoy.
Sí.
Muy bien. Alrighty.
All right. Well, thanks, Jason.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
We'll get you on again.
Yeah.
What are we going to talk about next time?
We're going to talk about the decline of the Roman Empire.
Oh, yes. How often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Okay, this meme again. Dude, honestly, actually a decent amount because like the Romans, dude, they did a lot of different things for civilization. And also I've been watching The Chosen recently, and like they have the Roman Empire in that all the time. So yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's true. If you're a Christian, I think you think about the Roman Empire just because.
Yeah, usually going to hear it in a sermon maybe once every month at least.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
that's true. Well, thanks for coming on, Jason.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'll see you again here in the future.
Let's do it.